Alright guys, welcome back to the Bearcat project. So if you remember in the last video where it flew, and quite well, considering that one of my tails was about to fall off from the high-speed flutter, I'm going to show you guys, this literally is the only way I can fix anything on this airplane because there's no access to anything. So, much like my little patch on the side here, I cut open the tail so I could access everything in here. And obviously I'm going to glue it back together, but I'm going to show you guys, and I had concerns and I think they were valid, but anyways, I had more concerns than just the elevator. There is no structure essentially for the vertical, and on a model this size I find that kind of shocking. So let me show you what we got going on here. So we have and this looks a little sketchy. I know it's soldered and stuff, but like I said, this is an old model. I might even change out these just because they're so old. It works obviously, but as you can see, there's looks to be about a 3/8 inch balsa spar that runs up the vertical, which is fine, but then there's nothing that attaches it to the rest of the fuselage, so you can kind of just grab the tail and it twists back and forth a little bit. Now the elevator arrangement, as you can see, is one push rod, and then it has these 90-degree bends down here that go into the elevators. This one is the one that I think that fluttered. I think the flutter caused that little block in there to break loose, and I think there's a hinge. This first hinge is messed up. The rest of the hinges feel good, but then obviously I can't really do this one-handed, but basically those spars broke from the flutter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some carbon tube spar in here. I'm going to get rid of this elevator push rod setup. I've got some Spectrum thin servos that I'm going to put in the tails, so right about here or so. Put a servo on each side, and then I'm going to add some plywood structure to attach the vertical to the fuselage. So obviously you have to keep everything I do back here super light because it's a long way from the CG, and even adding a few ounces of the tail could really throw off the CG. So got to be real careful with that. But I'm figuring with the weight of the push rod, and these servos are pretty small and light. Grab one. So these are the A7100s. It's got a metal arm, which is nice. Pretty nice high quality servo, super light for its size. And yeah, hoping that with those, I'm gonna cut out one of these bays here. I want to get as far out as I can because I want the load to be central. I don't want to have the arm way over here and allow the rest of the elevator to twist. So the more closer to the center you can get it, the more even the stress will be on the elevator and keep it from flexing. So obviously you're going to try and keep flexing and slop to a minimum here to avoid the flutter. So because, you know, it's a Bearcat, it's a fighter. If you can't dive it and you can't go fast, then might as well be a Cub. So we're going to get this thing fixed up. Alright, so what I've got here is I have hogged out a couple of pockets for spars using a carbon tube that's repurposed from my son's G65 EDF jet. It's like a 8-10 pound airplane, so it's actually pretty strong and light. So I've dug out a trough for that. Then up front, since it's not as important as the back one, I've got a square tube spar, also from the same airplane. So I wish I had a third hand here. I could show you guys just how broke this front spar is. It's pretty crazy. But anyways, I discovered a couple of things while digging this trough out of here. I thought that this had a bad hinge. Turns out there is no hinge in that location. Nothing there. What they were counting on was the torque arm for the elevator being captured by this plywood. Well, this one on this side is broken off, as you can see, and that's why it's allowed to move. This one's nice and tight because it's locked in place by that little plywood piece in there. So I'm going to fix that. That should solve that issue. As you can see, I decided to go up against this spar. That way the tube will tie into that, which is tied into the rest of the stab back here. And you can see the first hinge I've ground down to, so it'll be tied into that hinge, which will be nice because it'll make that hinge nice and solid now. Then the back, or the front one, kind of the same idea, just going to be a square tube. I'm going to use Gorilla Glue on these, so keep it nice and light. So next step here is to kind of clean it up, put masking tape around these areas. That way when the glue foams out, it won't get all over the paint. Not that it matters because I'm repainting it, but just makes it cleaner. So what I'll do is I'll allow it to foam out, then I'll slice it off with a blade, kind of sand it out, and then structurally that'll be done. Then I got to make servo pockets. I got some Hanger 9 titanium push rods. I use these on a lot of different things. That's what I have on the elevators on my T38 and everything else. So then I got the 440 clevises, or ball links, I should say, Dubro. So I have some heavy duty ones, but I think those ones should be more than enough for what we're doing here. I mean, all we had on here before was some little plastic thingies that, who knows. I mean, those things are not beefy at all. It's kind of sketchy. So anyways, I haven't decided where I'm putting the pocket, but I am thinking I don't want to go out too far because I don't want to have the pocket where the spar ends. That causes a structural issue right there. So it'll be inside of there a little bit, probably right in this area. So that way a little bit of spar is out here. And then obviously this has a balsa spar along here, I'm sure, and then sheeted with balsa and fiberglass. So it's a pretty strong elevator. It's just the connecting sections weren't spectacular under flutter. So, which not many airplanes survive that. So the fact that they did is pretty impressive. So yeah, so that'll put the control horn about right here, which isn't bad. I'm fairly happy with that positioning. I would, optimally would be out here, but there's not a lot of room out here either. And a couple other reasons. I have to bore a hole for the servo wire to get through. And if it's too far from the fuselage, I won't be able to really do that because this has a fiberglass end cap from the fuselage side. So anyways, get these spars glued in. Alright, so you can see here, got the Gorilla Glue is expanding. I went ahead and made a bulkhead for the vertical that ties into the existing wood spar right there. So I feel a lot better having the vertical actually tied to something now. And then I'm going to make a little bracket that supports this wire back here so it doesn't, you can see how it kind of moves around. And that slop is because this long wire is allowed to move. So basically I'm going to support that wire so it can't go back and forth. So that should help that. Not that it's really all that sloppy, it's fairly tight, but I don't like that. And I still might tie this balsa wood into the bottom of the fuselage here through here. I don't have a lot of room because of the cables, and these things have to move back and forth. So anyways, it's not real, Gorilla Glue is kind of messy. It kind of goes everywhere, but it's foaming, it's lightweight, and it bonds really well to just about anything. So you can see I've got nice little fillets forming around the wood, which is nice. And yeah, so once this is cured, I'm going to sand all this off smooth. Probably put a little bit of Bondo on there, smooth it out, and then call it good for now because I'm repainting the whole airplane. So once that's cured, I'm going to hog out my pockets for my servos, and we'll keep moving. Alright, so I've made this little supporting bracket in here, and now I've got a little spar to glue in that goes from the spar, balsa spar, up to here to kind of tie it to the fuselage a little bit better. Alright, so I got some Bondo in here, and just about everything is dried inside as far as the Gorilla Glue goes. So I've done some stress testing by hand, and yeah, it is way stronger than it was before. So excellent news. We'll finish up this little body work, and then I'll start the servo setup process. Alright, so I've got a servo mounted. It's a 1/4-inch plywood mount that's tied into the spar. And then I opened up the elevator and I made a control horn that's basically this whole size of this rib right here. Glues to the rib, and then I added a block to help tie it into the main balsa beam up front here and to tie it into the next rib over. So feels pretty strong. Should work pretty well. So that's got to cut a little slot off the side of this fabric and then glue that back down to the balsa. So once that's all done, we'll hook it up. I'm just gonna make a little cover for this, and then this side's done. And yeah, and just like that. Pretty sweet. That'll work. Plenty of throw. It's more than enough. Only needs about this much, really, but full rate. Cool. All right, so as with everything else with this airplane, we hit another bump in the road. So I was kind of finishing up this servo on this side, pretty much was almost done with it. And I had kind of done a up and down wiggle test on these things, and this side was fine because it was locked in with the rod coming through here. And when I was setting it up with the control horn and everything, I kind of gave it a pull, and it came out really far. And then I started looking at it, and I'm like, oh geez. And it actually had 2 hinges that were broke where the pin goes through them. So 2 hinges were broke. It was hanging out by 1 hinge and this part. So I decided, better safe than sorry. You know, these are 30-year-old hinges probably, so they're getting brittle and they're old, which means I'm going to need to at least do the ailerons at some point. Probably after the next couple of flights, I'll probably end up redoing the whole friggin' aileron setup just to be safe. But those seem tight for now, so they should be okay. So I've rehinged both elevators now, and I have cut the arm. This was the torque arm right here that used to actuate the control surface, and you can see it was a wire that ran all the way to here, and it actually has a brass insert for the wire, which is nice. But this wire is probably the softest wire I think I have ever felt used on a control surface. I was able to just grab it with pliers and just bend it like with ease. Incredibly soft, which is just crazy for a model this size. So anyways, this thing should be definitely good to go now if it flew before the way it was. So and these servos, they look really small in here. Probably, you know, part of that's the camera angle, but still, these are thin wing servos, but they're Metal Gear, and they're 115 ounces of torque, which is more than the combined is more torque than the single servo I had in here before, which is more torque than the servo that was in there before when I got it. So these should be fine. We'll see how the gear train holds up on them with the vibration, but this motor actually runs pretty smooth. It shakes the idle, but once you get above idle and like quarter throttle, like anything past that, actually it runs really smooth for a single cylinder especially. So probably because there's 40 pounds to shake, and so I think it dampens out a lot. But anyways, I'm super happy with the way the structure turned out. Everything is way stronger. So I'm going to make a little aluminum tube bushing for these and a much bigger piece of plywood to hold that. So that'll become a very strong hinge point, and we'll get these things glued back in. And then once I check the control operation, get the radio set up, make sure these are all working properly and everything's good back here, I'm gonna glue this back on. I'll do some balsa lands around it, glue that back on. It'll be kind of like sort of temporary to where in the future, if I ever have to, I can kind of like break that bond and remove that piece. I don't want to make it a hatch, just because if I do, that takes away a lot of the strength around here. So, you know, I don't really want to do that. So I'd rather have it stronger, and if I ever have to get back in there, I can via just kind of pushing it, flexing it, cracking that seam back, and then I can just cut it right back out and redo it again. So hopefully that never happens, but you never know. So anyways, that's where we're at. We are back at it with more problems. All right, so got everything working. Pretty happy with it. Nice and very minimal slop. A lot tighter on the rudder. So way stronger everywhere. So I just need to glue that back on and make some little covers. I'm just gonna rattle can some blue over those Bondo spots for now. And yeah, it should just about do it. So I'm gonna go fly her tomorrow, hopefully. That was a long video. Hope you guys learned something new. Don't buy used airplanes. All right, we'll see you guys in the next one.